So we're going to read today The Stable Boy and the Prince. This story by John Martinson.
That's why you told me to go to the second page, because it was telling me the same thing.
Okay. This story, we are focusing on character point of view. So I can already tell I have two characters. I have the stable boy and the prince. Now, chances are these two characters are going to have a different point of view. Remember, a different opinion or the way that they see the events that are happening in this story. So as we read, we need to be thinking about these two characters and how they feel. So I'm going to click my highlighter tool. Go ahead and do the same. The stable boy, I'm going to highlight yellow. Just going to do just a quick highlight here. So anything I find in the text for the stable boy is going to be yellow. Then I'm going to click down to green, and I'm going to highlight the prince green. Just a quick highlight. That way I know anything I find in the text that's green will be the prince's point of view. So when I'm looking back after I finish reading my story, I'll be able to see the difference. All right, good job doing that with me. I can see on your screen you guys are highlighting those. Perfect. Here we go. Lily, if you are not on this activity with me, I will excuse you from the Zoom meeting. I can see on your screen you were looking at different announcements on Seesaw, and that's not where we're at right now. Thank you for making a good choice. Don't click delete, just draft it. All right, so I'm going to read the story to you, and then after a paragraph or two, we're going to stop and we're going to start highlighting some different things that show the character's point of view. It says, Sam offered the apple he'd found to the horse, Shadowfax. He stroked the horse's huge head and wished for a moment that Shadowfax could talk. 6 months had passed since Sam had been taken from his village to work at the king's stables, and it had been very lonely for him. Yes. So I'm going to switch my highlighter back to yellow because I can already tell that this guy, Sam, he's the stable boy because it says he had been taken from his village to work at the king's stables. So since he's working in the stables, which is the place where the horses live, he's taking care of the horses. That makes him the stable boy. So we know that Sam is the stable boy. So anything we find with Sam's point of view is going to be yellow. Just then, the prince came riding past. Prince Oliver was about the only other boy his age that Sam ever saw. As the prince passed, Sam knelt and bowed his head. But as he looked down, he saw a huge snake coiling up the prince's path. The prince's horse reared back and then bolted. So reared back is, you know, when you've seen like horses like go back on their back feet, like when they get freaked out and then they run off. So that's what happened. Horses are really scared of snakes. And so he sees this snake and he's like, oh man. And then he's like, I'm out, peace. And the horse just bounces. He's done. And so we can see now, here is the prince. Prince Oliver. What? It's from my watch. Please stay focused. So Prince Oliver was the only other boy his age. So we know that he's Sam's age. They're the same age. Paragraph 3. With hardly a thought, Sam jumped on Shadowfax and raced after Prince Oliver, who was struggling to stay in the saddle. But no horse was faster than Shadowfax. Sam reached the prince and grabbed his horse's reins. So we see that Sam, without hardly a thought, jumped on Shadowfax and raced after Prince Oliver. So we can see that Sam is a selfless person, right? He's a helper. He sees that Prince Oliver is in trouble and he doesn't think, oh, what should I do? Should I cut somebody? Should I do something? Should I just act like that never happened? Like he jumps on his horse and he's like, man, I got to help him. And he races after him to try and help because he's about to fall off his horse. And horses run so fast that if he were to fall off, he would get really hurt.
Mom, I need help with saying zero.
Okay. Just use the text tool. Just erase. Use the eraser tool.
My friend is one.
There we go. All right. So we know that Sam is racing after him. He's fine. And he's racing after him to try and help, right? So he reaches the prince and he grabs the horse's reins. The reins are like the part of the horse where when you're riding them, you hold on to, like those ropes. You guys know what I'm talking about? That's what he's holding on to so that he can kind of help slow the horse down. The prince thanked Sam for his efforts. As they rode back to the castle, the prince spoke pleasantly with Sam. When they reached the stables, Sam said, "I hope we can talk again. It's so good to speak with someone my own age." So we can see that the prince thanks Sam for helping him. And then they speak nicely to each other. They speak pleasantly. But then we see that Sam, the stable boy, says, "I hope we can talk again. It's good to talk with someone my own age." So he misses hanging out with people his own age because it's just him. What? It's real here. There. Now we're on paragraph 6. The prince fell silent. Then he said, "Remember your place. I am a prince, and you are just a stable boy." Ooh, that's not very nice, especially to the guy that just saved his life, right? This stable boy didn't have to do anything when he saw the prince's horse run off with him, but he didn't think about it. He wanted to help, so he runs to help him. He saves his life. They're talking to each other, and he's like, "Hey, I hope we can talk again soon." And he says, "Remember your place." So we're going to turn this green because it's Prince Oliver, who's not a very nice person. "Remember your place. I am a prince and you are just a stable boy." Sam bowed and returned to the barn. "I'll never have a friend here," he whispered. Shadowfax walked over and rubbed his face against him. Sam hugged the horse. "What am I saying, my friend? I've got you." So we can tell that Sam feels lonely, right? He was taken from his village to work here and he doesn't have any friends. And so he feels sad. He says, "I'll never have a friend here." But then he realizes that the horse is his friend. It's kind of a sad story. I don't like this ending where the prince is being mean. It's like, "Remember your place." It's like, you remember your place. You would have been off that horse in the ground with a broken leg if it wasn't for me. That's what I would have said. But then I'd probably get in trouble. But still, it was not a very nice thing for him to do. So our close reader habit today to help us understand this story is, what does the prince think of the stable boy? And we already kind of highlighted those details to show his point of view. So we can tell Sam wants to be friends with the prince, right? And not because he's a prince, but because they're the same age. He just wants to hang out with someone his age. He just wants to talk to somebody that's a kid like him. But the prince thinks he's better than him. He says, "Remember your place. You're just a stable boy." So we can tell that the prince's point of view is very different from the stable boy, from Sam's. Ready for page 2? Give me a thumbs up. Awesome. All right, so we've got some questions to answer on page 2.
I mean, you're writing on seesaw, Mom. See?
Good job. So page 2, question 1. What is Sam's point of view about working at the king's stables? Remember in the beginning where it says that he had to work in the king's stables? He'd been there for 6 months already, and he hardly ever saw anybody his own age. What's his point of view? Is he excited that he gets to ride Shadowfax? Is he lonely because he has no friends? Does he feel lucky to have such an important job? Or is he bored because he only has a horse to talk to? Which one best shows his point of view? Go ahead and type in the chat, A, B, C, or D. What do you think? There are two that are pretty close. But think about which one best shows his point of view. I'm going to go back and reread as you guys are thinking about it. Sam offered the apple he'd found to the horse Shadowfax. He stroked the horse's huge head and wished for a moment that Shadowfax could talk. 6 months had passed since Sam had been taken from his village to work in the king's stables, and he had been very lonely time for him. So looking at question 2, which is the best choice? Go ahead and type it in the chat.
Can you help me write 20?
Good job. It looks like most of us agree B, he's lonely. He doesn't have any friends. That would be really hard. Question 2 is 2 parts. Remember these part A, part B questions? They have to go together like peanut butter and jelly, not peanut butter and bologna. We got to make sure these 2 pieces match together just right. The first part says, what is Prince Oliver's point of view towards Sam? We really hear this part towards the end, right? What is his point of view towards Sam? He would like to be friends with the boy who rescued him. He thinks Sam should not have spoken to him. He likes Sam, but he can't be friends with the stable boy. He feels sad that he's too old to be friends with Sam. What do you guys think? Go ahead and type in the chat. Which one best fits? A, B, C, or D? And as you are thinking about that, I'm going to reread these 2 paragraphs here to kind of give us some ideas of what it could be and why. The prince thanks Sam for his efforts. As they rode back to the castle, the prince spoke pleasantly with Sam. When they reached the stables, Sam said, I hope we can talk again. It's so good to speak with someone my own age. The prince fell silent, and then he said, remember your place. I am a prince, and you are just a stable boy. Which one best shows how the prince feels towards Sam? Because remember, they're talking to each other. It says the prince spoke pleasantly with Sam. That means that as they're writing back, they're talking to each other, talking about like the weather or maybe things they like to do or whatever. But then when Sam says, hey, let's hang out again soon, he says, well, I don't know that we can do that. I'm a prince and you're just a stable boy. So I see a lot of us saying B. He thinks Sam should not have spoken to him. But when it says the prince spoke pleasantly with Sam, that means that the prince and him were talking back and forth. If he thinks Sam shouldn't have spoken to him at all, he wouldn't have spoken pleasantly to him. Does that make sense? Like if he thought, you should not talk to me, I am a prince and you are nothing, then he wouldn't have talked back and forth. So it's not B. It's not that he thinks he shouldn't have spoken to him because the prince and him talk back and forth a lot, right, on their way back. It's when Sam says, let's talk again soon, the prince is like, well, wait a minute. So which one makes sense now? Boys and girls, whoa, in the chat. I need your answer one time. That's it. And this is why, because if I get C, and a bunch of them from one person, and then between that, other people are trying to type their answer one time like you're supposed to, I can't see anybody else's answer except for yours. So type it one time, please. And that's it. But I do see, yes, we are all agreeing it is C, absolutely. He likes Sam because they talk pleasantly to each other. They were talking and riding along, but he feels like he can't be friends with the stable boy because he says, remember your place. I am a prince and you are just a stable boy. Because he feels like, well, since I'm a prince and you're a stable boy, I feel like we can't really be friends. So the answer is C. That one's kind of a tough one. I would think B too, except for when it says that they spoke pleasantly. When you're done with that, go ahead and click to page 3 for a written response. Make sure you highlight here too. It says underline or highlight phrases in both paragraphs. Both paragraphs. See how we highlighted one here and one here that support that answer. Thumbs up when you were on page 3, ready for the written response.
Three.
All right. Let's go to page 3.
Okay, I don't. Okay, now do that.
Our short response question says, what is your own point of view towards the prince? How do you feel about the prince? Explain why you feel this way using details from the story. So here's our hint. Look for details about what the prince says and does. So after reading this story, what's your point of view on the prince? So you're going to start out by typing my point of view about the prince is. Yep.
It looks terrible.
Use the text tool. My point of view about the prince is.
But they write it. I want to write it too.
Yeah, but buddy, it's just easier to use the text tool. And then you're going to tell me, what's your point of view on the prince? What do you think about him? And then you're going to say, I think this because. Why do you have that point of view? So for example, I might say, and you can type something different than mine if you would like. Give me a second. You can type something different than mine, or you can type the same thing as mine. That's your choice, okay? So for me, my point of view about the prince is that he's not a very nice guy. My point of view about the prince is that he is not a very nice person. That's my point of view. Yours might be different. Maybe you agree with him and you're like, well, he is a prince. He might get in trouble or whatever your reasoning is. But my point of view, okay, Lonnie, is that I don't think the prince is a very nice person. That's what I think. But you can choose, your point of view might be different than mine, and that's okay too. So I think this because Sam wanted to be friends with him. And he, or I should say, and the prince told Sam to, oops, I know I spelled Sam wrong. Remember his place because he was just a stable boy. So they couldn't be friends. That's my point of view. Your point of view might be different.
Mom?
You can go ahead and type my point of view if you agree with me, or if you disagree, you can type your point of view. Go ahead and take a minute to do that.
That's a lot of writing. It looks like one whole big sentence.
It's a paragraph.
Anyways, can you help me with my 2 right here?